Process of the speed did not compromise at all safety, nor did it compromise scientific integrity.
The science himself, Dr. Anthony Fauci, raised miscarriage after the COVID shots as a theoretical risk and openly discussed the very real possibility that it was linked to the then still in clinical trial novel injections, and instead of proceeding with caution or properly informing the public about the massive unknowns, they took extreme steps to ensure that nothing stood in the way of safe and effective. Let's dig in.
Those who are pregnant is at increased risk of complications from COVID-19 and others as well. So in any case, getting a booster dose is important if you have high risk, if you've got the COVID-19 vaccines earlier on in over 6 months since your vaccination. And so I think those recommendations were very thoughtful and staged.
Physicians are obligated to facilitate what we call informed consent. Anybody, before they have any kind of medical procedure performed on them, are allowed to provide informed consent.
Newly released Fauci texts show that he was flagging concerns around the COVID shots causing miscarriage and unknown risks in pregnant women as early as January 2021. That's before the shots were heavily marketed to pregnant and breastfeeding women. Despite privately texting with Fauci about their concerns regarding these shots for women, CDC Director Rochelle Walensky told the public on April 23, 2021, that there were no concerns observed for people vaccinated in the third trimester or any safety concerns at all for their babies. This despite major safety signals before mass rollout and whistleblowers like virologist and immunologist Dr. Byron Bridle sounding the alarm on the mRNA platform and spike protein formulation over 5 years ago.
So I want to highlight something here, first of all, when it comes to women and why women in particular should be concerned about these shots. It was about 4 years ago when I expressed concerns about the systemic biodistribution of this so-called vaccine technology and how these little lipid nanoparticles, these fat bubbles, could get distributed throughout the body, causing cells throughout the body to potentially express the spike protein, which is known to be a toxic protein in the human body. I expressed concern at that time, but this is quite amazing, and I want to show people this because that was using data that I had obtained from the website of the Japanese government. And what was required when these shots are being considered under emergency use authorization, or in Canada as we call it, the authorization by interim order, is for these biodistribution studies, they ideally would capture the peak accumulation of this so-called vaccine technology in tissues in the body, and you should actually see it disappearing, right? We were told it would disappear from the body. They didn't capture that, but what they claimed to have captured was what they call a plateau. So at least they claimed they were showing that the concentrations weren't going any higher in the tissues. And so they could make this argument, therefore, that these shots probably wouldn't last in the body more than about 48 hours, which was the time that they ran these studies. So I want to show you what happened because this was not revealed to the public. And I find that this is actually very egregious. So in the Japanese data set, they had these curves, and it appeared that they had captured a plateau, right? A plateau for the accumulation of this vaccine technology, in this case in the liver, right? So it appears they captured a plateau. But what Pfizer did not disclose to the public was that this was a trick. And what I've done here is I've actually parsed out the data for males and females. And you can see in males, the concentration was going down at the end of the study, but in females, it was increasing. And so what they did to hide this increase, which would be should automatically have been a concern for any regulatory agent who's looking at this data. To hide that, they pooled the data for the males and females to give this false appearance of having captured a plateau. So this is just for the liver, where I'm just showing that example. But let me show you, if we go focus on just the female tissues, this is what the data actually looks like for females. It's skyrocketing in every single tissue that was assessed. These are 6 different tissues. Now look at these data here. Here's another 8 tissues from females, skyrocketing in all the tissues. They never captured, let alone did they fail to capture a peak. They certainly also did not capture a plateau. And this is very concerning for females. And let me just focus you in here on one piece of data. Look at the ovaries. It's increasing exponentially in the ovaries over the time course of this study. any regulator should have looked at this and said, this is very concerning data for every tissue. But let's use the ovaries as an example. So what the regulator should have said is they should have compelled Pfizer to go back and look at the ovaries and say, this is very disconcerting findings. Does this mean that there is potential injury caused to the ovaries, right? And indeed, what's fascinating is a study just like that was just done, and it was just published a couple of months ago. And here are the data for this. And what it shows is the number of follicles in the ovaries of these same rats that were studied here. And long story short, between the control group, which has got a placebo, like a salt water injection, versus those that got the modified RNA shots, the rats, for all of the follicles were reduced in number, dramatically reduced in number. So let me put this in lay terms. The ovaries were decimated. The ovaries of these rats were decimated. Indeed, this very disconcerting data translated into overt damage to the ovaries of these rats.
So what does this mean for the uterus and childbearing capacity? Well, one group of physicians and researchers, including cardiologist Peter McCullough, critical care specialist Paul Merrick, obstetrician James Thorpe, and others, published a non-exhaustive review in the Journal of American Physicians and Surgeons cataloging the harms tied to the COVID-19 injections. Buried in the section on reproductive risks is data that should stop every woman of childbearing age and regulators in their tracks. Pfizer's own post-market surveillance report from February of 2021, that's the one that they submitted after the shots started rolling out, which was allowed, by the way, because they were approved on an interim basis with rolling submissions, meaning they could submit safety data literally as it rolled in from the ongoing clinical trials. Well, that surveillance report recorded pregnancy outcomes showing an 81% miscarriage rate among the cases with known results. That's 26 losses out of 32. It's a small sample size, but absolutely worth halting the product and investigating immediately until it was better understood what exactly was driving that outcome. The authors then flagged the missing follow-up on hundreds more participants, leaving a lot out of the picture. And then there's the widely cited New England Journal of Medicine paper from CDC-sponsored article from Simapakuro et al. And the CDC's V-Safe and Pregnancy Registry and VAERS. The research touted a reassuring 12.6% miscarriage rate, saying that it was similar to the rate typically expected in pregnancy. But if you dig into the raw numbers, most of those completed pregnancies involved women vaccinated in their third trimester, and that's way past the window when most miscarriages happen. If you strip those out, you're left with 104 losses out of 127 pregnancies in those earlier trimesters. That new number is a miscarriage rate of 82%. VAERS signals and later analysis only added to this concern. Proportional reporting ratios for miscarriage skyrocketing compared to flu shots, elevated stillbirths, neonatal complications, and evidence of vaccine mRNA crossing the placenta, and then of course the well-documented evidence that it shows up also in breast milk.
They try and downplay the concentration, say, well, it was trace amounts. To which I would ask anybody, what is the definitive safe amount of messenger RNA to feed to a baby? We have no idea. There is no defined safe cutoff. So you can't say, well, it seemed like it was very small amounts, therefore it must be safe. No, that has to be tested empirically to determine whether or not it's safe. What I immediately think is, what about the spike protein? These mammary cells clearly are acquiring the messenger RNA, obviously because they can package it in these little vesicles that bleb off from the cells and get into the milk. And if they're taking up the messenger RNA, remember the messenger RNA is designed to be a blueprint to get the cells that take it up to manufacture the spike protein from the SARS coronavirus too. And so my question then is, how much of that spike protein is being expressed on these cells? And this is the interesting thing now is, yes, the spike protein is designed to remain embedded in the membrane of a cell, so expressed on the surface. But this is what we now know, because there's these vesicles that can bleb off from the surface of the cell, guess what? They carry with them the spike protein on the surface, exosomes, for example. And we know that these exosomes can circulate through the body now. That's other science that's been published. And so the spike protein can get disseminated systemically that way. So the question now is, how much spike protein is expressed? So they found messenger RNA. I suspect there's probably more spike protein than there is messenger RNA present in the breast milk. And so, and if that's true, the spike protein is much more stable. And so that could last much more than 48 hours. So, but that's where the 48-hour recommendation came in tomorrow. But I would caution anybody who's breastfeeding. I mean, at the point that I'm at now, I mean, these never should have been recommended. These messenger RNA vaccines for any mother who's breastfeeding, period. And it's crazy to assume that 48 hours is a safe time point at this point in time. We need much more research, which means stop giving the vaccine to this demographic and do this very kind of research that should have occurred before the public rollout.
Remember Alberta's COVID-19 pandemic data review task force report? It used Dr. Pierre Corey's analysis of Pfizer's own data and found that there was an 87.5% fetal and neonatal mortality rate. To find more credible reports on this topic and sign our petition calling for the shots to be taken off the market, head on over to nomoreshots.ca and find out more. That's nomoreshots.ca. Instead of properly informing the public about any of the potential risks around things like cytokine storms, pregnancy complications, miscarriage, and other adverse outcomes, and the uncertainty surrounding those risks, regulators and public health officials continued to reassure pregnant women the vaccines were safe, effective, even as serious safety signals and data was still emerging.
Just want to remind people that those who are pregnant is at increased risk of complications from COVID-19 and others as well. So in any case, getting a booster dose is important if you have high risk, if you've got the COVID-19 vaccines earlier on in over 6 months since your vaccination. And so I think those recommendations were very thoughtful and staged.
Importantly, no safety concerns were observed for people vaccinated in the third trimester or safety concerns for their babies. As such, CDC recommends that pregnant people receive the COVID-19 vaccine.
We saw evidence of actual cover-up and lying about this information. And let me just show you an example. When the United States Food and Drug Administration released data from these biodistribution studies, here's an image of what they showed right here. And this is very concerning because they showed in the United States Food and Drug Administration release of the data, which they tried to hide for 75 years and only released when compelled by a court order, they had this one picture shown. And what this is this is showing, what you're seeing here are images of rats. You can see their tails here, and this is the lower end of the rats. Their legs are here, and this is the lower body of the rats. And they have their feet taped here. And this is an imaging technology which showed where these little fat bubbles, where these lipid nanoparticles were going in the bodies of the rats. You notice they have the image cut off here. And what they're showing is this is the large leg muscles. This is where they injected the vaccine into these rats. In people, they injected into the shoulder. In rats, we do the intramuscular injections into the large leg muscles. And they're trying to insinuate here that the only place where you see the vaccine going is at the injection site. So stays at the injection site, right? That was the classic mantra that we heard publicly.
It's actually hard to get it to stick around for long enough to get an immune response. And it probably only lasts in our bodies for about 2 days, maximum 2 days. And then it starts disappearing quite quickly. And because of the way it's picked up, it doesn't get carried around the body. It's in the location where it's injected.
The injection stays at the injection site. But this is the problem. They weren't expecting scientists like myself to put this data side by side with the information from the Japanese government. And there they had the exact same image. And I put them side by side here so you can appreciate by the shape of the tail, the shape of everything. These are the exact same images. They've done two things. By computer manipulation, they've changed the intensity of the signal, so it gives the visual appearance of being a different image. It's not. These are identical images. And you see what they've done here? They cropped this image. And what did they do, Tamara? They hid this massive signal that was occurring in the upper bodies of these rats. This is in the area of the kidneys and the adrenal glands. And then when they actually reported this in their documentation, they excluded any statement of the signal being present in this location. Right here, you can see they showed images that where it appeared in the liver, but they hid the data for the kidneys and adrenal glands. Why? Because the story that was being told, the narrative that was being told, was that it stays the injection site and then it goes to the liver and the liver gets rid of it from the body, right? So it doesn't stay in the body. And that's what you can see here that they showed, that it only showed limited drainage to the liver. They completely ignored and hid this signal. This is, you can see with your own eyes, this is outright lying. This is lying by a health regulatory agency. And this is what all physicians in Canada are obligated to adhere to. The definition by the Supreme Court of Canada for informed consent is this. Informed consent is what a reasonable patient in the particular patient's position would have expected to hear before consenting.
If informed consent is a requirement, were any women aware of the official parliamentary documentation that, quote, none of the COVID-19 vaccine manufacturers sought indications for use in pregnant or lactating women or submitted randomized clinical trial data in pregnant or lactating women for regulatory evaluation, end quote? Or that the package insert, also known as the product monograph of Pfizer and Moderna shots, says explicitly the safety and efficacy of these shots in pregnant women have not yet been established.
The manufacturers of these products never even asked for these shots to be given to pregnant breastfeeding women, nor did they submit any data from randomized controlled trials to support giving these shots to pregnant women. And look at this. This summarizes it in a nutshell. Health Canada has not approved any safety claims with regard to pregnant and lactating women. So again, I would ask, when it comes to informed consent, would you expect that a pregnant or breastfeeding woman in Canada would have wanted that information before they consented to taking these COVID-19 shots, let alone remember the fact that they were mandated for pregnant and breastfeeding women here in Canada.
How vindicating is this for Ottawa Police Detective Helen Gruce, who has faced years of professional isolation, a multi-year relentless disciplinary witch hunt, personal financial ruin from legal bills the police association refused to cover, and a guilty finding for the crime of simply doing her job, probing a shocking 2 to 3 times spike in infant deaths that landed on the radar of the Sexual Assault and Child Abuse Unit right after the rollout of those novel COVID-19 modified RNA vaccines that were never properly tested on pregnant or breastfeeding women. And all of that brings us to the question that deserves an answer. Could this be part of the reason why the science himself, Dr. Anthony Fauci, is now invoking the Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, rather than answering questions about what federal health officials knew, when they knew it, and how these concerns were communicated to the public under oath?
I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
If Fauci and other officials were privately discussing potential miscarriage risks, cytokine storms, and unanswered questions about vaccination during pregnancy while publicly offering broad reassurances about safety, then we all deserve to know what exactly was known at the time, who made the decisions, what evidence was considered, and whether the public was given the full picture. Because if the people responsible for communicating those risks now refuse to answer under oath, the obvious question really is, what exactly are they afraid to answer? For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini.